Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study through each book of the Bible verse by verse and chapter by chapter. It's a plain study. I want to also emphasize we are in the book of Genesis, and we are studying the sixth day of creation, the creation of man. And this is what really it's all about. In other words, the first 5 days of creation, it was God preparing the earth for man, and then man is his top creation. Let me read again. I'm going to read from the Psalms again, and this is to augment our Genesis study. And again, verse 4 says, "What is man that you remember him?" Meaning God, "the Son of Man that you look after him. You made him a little less than God, and crowned him with glory and honor. You made him Lord over the works of your hands, and you put everything under his feet, all the sheep, oxen, as well as the animals in the wild, the birds of the sky, and the fish of the sea that pass through the currents of the seas." All right? And so this is Psalm, and I'm reading Psalm in conjunction with Genesis. Notice he asks the question, what is man that he is mindful of? And that's a very interesting question. What is man? I made the statement that if you listen to the tone of a lot of scientists and humanists, they take the opposite position. Why do we think man is so important? And I only say that to kind of show you that sinful man and God on two different planes here. But notice he said God. What we can ask the question: why is man so important? Last couple of studies I did some comparison. I contrast. Evolution, for example. And I'm not going to go down that road again, even though I'm tempted, but I'm not. But it was important to see that, because these are the ideologies that are coming against us in this day. That we're not just products of evolution, because if we were products of evolution, like with all creation, what we see here, there are so many on purpose things that you would have to question and say, how could this be if everything was just random? 14 billion years of evolution is what they tell us, the universe. 14, and yet you see these stark differences, okay? It's just unbelievable for that. All right, let's go back and let's read verse 26 again. He says, verse 26, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, birds of the sky, livestock, and all earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth." Now I said, and notice he said that God, and notice God's, again, express purpose, express statement. Let us make man in our image. So we are image bearers of God. Now, let's put that in context. We are physical image bearers of God. So when you think about the creation, in other words, you can look at man and get an ideal of what the being of God is, right? The being of God. That he's not some phantom kind of ghost, right? But when you think about the intellect and even the likeness now, think about this, even the likeness, does God look like us? Or, more correctly, do we look like God, right? Do we look like God? And he says we were created in the image of God. So we mirror God, in a sense, on almost every plane, right? So in our appearance, our intellect, okay? And the fact that then God says we're going to let them rule over the planet. So God creates this planet. And he sticks man on this planet, and he says, this is your planet. Rule over it. Rule over it. And as I said before, There was a teaching that came out a few years ago from some of the Word of Faith teachers. They kind of got in trouble for teaching what is called the little God theology. And to me, when you do come up with statements like that, they didn't care, by the way, at the time. So this is sort of a mute observation. But I think about things like defund the police, right? Like think about that phrase, defund the police. And it was such a kind of a foolish thing because it's so easy to trip over. And to me, the teaching of the little gods, right? In this sense, the statement was true. I mean, God Himself. We just read it in the Psalms right here that He made him. Let me go back and read. And I think they did use maybe this scripture as one. As you have made, verse 5, you have made him little less than the gods and crowned him with honor and glory. In that respect, it is true. The way we think, process thoughts, God created us this way. Okay? So this was God's intent and God's purpose. Look at verse 27. So God created man in His own image. He created him in the image of God, right? So this is he's kind of going out of the way, right, to make his point, right? So now let me just say and be clear, I'm not endorsing that theology when I'm saying they kind of was foolish in how they packaged it as usual. The little gods. And then everybody was saying, I'm a little God, I'm a little God, I'm a little God. And he was kind of saying that, I'm a little God, I'm a little God. No, I'm a man. We're created. Again, I don't want to spend too much time because that's not my focus there. Because they did have a whole different thing. They were endorsing their prosperity and the kind of faith, what they taught in faith, and they used that. What I'm saying is that the concept in and of itself, the phrase in and of itself, wasn't all that wrong because God Himself is saying that. Now, anyone reading this, however, and you wouldn't do as they do, twist scripture as they do to kind of prop up their theology. We all recognize, okay, God has placed us here on this planet as the heads of this planet. No other creature thinks the way we think. We do rule. And we're going to see something else in terms of, I told you about this TV series that came out a few years ago called Zoo. It was a science fiction that kind of, it came out and said, well, what if, of course, some kind of whatever happened, and all of a sudden now all the animals have cognitive thought. And they can not only have cognitive thought, but in some kind of way they kind of connect themselves. And they turned on man and started kind of overrunning the cities, An interesting concept, because I'm going to get into why that doesn't happen. Think about that, why that doesn't happen. Why doesn't all of the lions and the intelligent, think about this, the intelligent beings, like elephants, right? They say that elephants are very intelligent. So why don't the elephants get together with some of the other animals and go, you know what, we're tired of being put in zoos right here. We're stronger. We don't even have to be smarter. If we just bum rush the whole thing, right, it would be pretty bad for man. And that television series sort of did that. But but he says right here, verse 27, so God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female. Okay, He created them, male and female. Now, he introduced this. Now, this is Moses speaking, and he interjects male and female. He created them. So, at this time, in the point of creation, Eve is nowhere to be seen. We will get to Eve later, obviously, in chapter 2. But Adam is created first, and then Eve. But notice we see the mentioning of it as God is pronouncing the creation of man. So He created man in His own image. So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female. And I think it's important to understand in God's mind what he is creating now. Right? In other words, woman is going to come later, but understand and note that woman is very much in the plan and the purpose of God. And she's even stated right here in the very genesis of the creation of man, the beginning of the creation of man. Look at verse 28. He blessed them, and God said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Now let's stop, because remember, he told the other creatures, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. In other words, you start with creatures, and then they multiply, they begin to fill the earth. Okay. One thing of note, however, not going to spend too much time on it, but let me see if I can find it right quick. Verse number 20. Verse number 20. And again, this is a trivial point, but just an observation, that's all. But notice in verse 20, and this would be the 5th day, okay? And he says, and God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds, plural, fly above the earth in the open firmament of the heavens. And God created great sea monsters, plural, and every living creature that moveth wherewith the waters swarm, and their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good. And so God said, and God blessed them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And the morning and the evening was the 5th day. And then he said, and God produced, and then God said, let the earth produce living creatures according to their kind, livestock, creatures, creatures that crawl, and the wildlife on the earth according to their kind. And it was so. I only kind of like want to make this kind of trivial observation. We don't know, at least it's not clear, as when God spoke, did he speak swarms, right? Did he start with 2? Or did he speak swarms of animals, right? The marine life, animals, livestock. Now, the only reason I'm saying this is because notice he said, he starts with one man and one woman, and then from those 2, the earth would populate. And then, notice, he tells every other creature, right, fill the earth, multiply, this will tell the animals, right, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the sea, right? So let the birds multiply on the earth. So he tells them to multiply. He tells them to multiply. And now when he comes to man, verse 28 again, and God blessed them, meaning the female, male and female, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. Now notice this, and subdue it. Rule the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, and let every creature that crawls on the earth. So that's the difference between man and every other wildlife, every other creature. Notice God said you rule. We didn't evolve this way, but God designed it so. And that's the difference. That's why monkeys, right, which, people will say the closest kin to us DNA wise, cannot rule the earth, will never rule the earth. lions, tigers, and bears, right, will never rule the earth. Only man was created to rule the earth. Okay, only man. So verse 29, God also said, now he's saying this to the man, look, I've given you every seed-bearing plant on the surface of the entire earth, and every tree whose fruit contains seed. This food will be for you, for all the wildlife of the earth, for every bird of the sky, and for every creature that crawls on the earth, everything having the breath of life in it. I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw all that he made, that it was very good. Evening came and morning, the sixth day. Now you will note here that God now tells them to rule the earth, and then says, be fruitful and multiply, and then says, now I've given you pretty much the planet. Now, what is interesting about this here, we know that plants, if you see it here, plants, marine life is given for food. Notice the wildlife also, from the beginning, wildlife was designed to be for food. Now, I'm going to say this. Wildlife was designed for food and everything. So, and so when we talk about diet, because, we're talking about how God created man. Okay, how God created man. Now, again, we have to look at, there is a great difference between how God created man versus what man became. And that's important to understand. So we're looking at now, before sin, the purity of creation. Now, if you notice again from God's commands itself, the very fact of God's command, remember, he tells them to rule over the earth. Subdue it. Now, as I said, man is a little god in the context of God, under God, first and foremost. He is a little god in the context of how God created him, and for the purpose that God created him. So on the one hand, remember, if you got over here, God and his magnificence, his glory. Then you have man, God's crown and honor. Right? And then God creates for him, hey, here's your little kingdom. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples quickly. There was a rapper that did the same thing, right? He had this big estate, and for his son, he created a little house, had a little mini mansion, little cars, and everything else. So, you think about that. But this was, the son didn't go out and drive. I mean, the son was like 5 or 6 years old at the time. His father had plenty of money, but he never went outside in the sense of the estate. But on the estate, the son had a little mansion, and he had his little cars, right? Little mini cars. I'm thinking of kind of that image, see? And so, yes, son, you drive, and as long as he stayed on the estate, he wasn't to venture outside of the state. I'm kind of giving just kind of poorly, I know. In God's eyes, how close we are to the heart of God, to the mind of God, than animals. All right, I'm going to pick this up in our next video and elaborate more on this, because there's some good thoughts on that. All right, till next time, I'll see you then.